pictures of God's redemption, particularly now that we are seeing the rise of the anointing. We're seeing that David model being given to us of how salvation is going to come about. And it's certainly going to be true in regards to what we see in these chapters. Now, I will admit to you, I wanted to do chapters 20 through 23. And then I started writing the sermon, and there was just no way it was going to be twice as long. And the reason why is chapters 20 to 23 hold together as a very important unit, but there is so many pictures in these chapters, as much as I tried my best to want to hold those 4 chapters together, there was no way to do that without us leaving here an extra hour later. So we will stay with these 2 chapters here, chapter 20 and chapter 21, where we're going to see a beautiful picture about how the anointed is going to call people to himself. Now, chapter 20 opens with a particularly interesting picture because you have David and Jonathan essentially trying to figure out the threat that they are looking at. David comes to Jonathan and says, "Your father's trying to kill me, and I gotta go." And Jonathan says, No. That's absolutely can't be happening because my father tells me everything that he's going to do. And you can imagine Jonathan saying, "Remember, I made him make an oath back a while ago where he promised that he would not try to kill you." And so David says, "Well, your father's trying to kill me, and the reason why he hasn't told you is because he knows that we're friends. And so if he were to tell you, he doesn't want you to intervene and argue with him about all that." So that's what's going on. So they're going back and forth as Jonathan and David are trying to figure out, okay, well, is Saul going to kill David or not? So Jonathan says, "What do you want me to do?" So David comes up with a plan. And David's plan in trying to determine Saul's intentions are simply this. He says, "Tell your father I'm not able to come to this multi-day feast that's about to happen. Instead, tell him my family back in Bethlehem is having an annual feast that I needed to be at. And if your father is fine that I'm gone, then we will know that it's safe for me and he's not trying to come after me. However, if your father is upset that I'm not there, then we will know that he is trying to kill me and that he is enraged with me and that it's not safe for me." And so Jonathan says, "Okay, sounds good." And then Jonathan says, "Well, how are we going to tell you this? How am I going to let you know all this?" He says, "Well, here's what I'm going to do. When I find out the information, I will have my archer retriever arrow boy go out there, and I'm going to send him along out there, and I'm going to shoot arrows. And if I shoot arrows to the side of him, then you will know it's safe for you to stay. But if I shoot arrows over his head and say, go even further, then you will know it is not safe for you." So they go, "Okay, plan figured out, no big deal." So day 1 of the feast, David's not there, and Saul doesn't say anything. Saul just seems to think that maybe David has been unclean because of something that he's done in his warfare or what have you, and that's why David's not there. So nobody says anything, interesting enough. Day 2 of the feast, though, David's not there again. And now Saul wants to know, where is David? And Jonathan gives the answer and says, well, what he's doing is he's in Bethlehem for this annual feast that's going on. And so, he certainly begs to be excused. And Saul absolutely gets angry, just is enraged by the fact that David is not there. And it is interesting because this starts a whole process between Jonathan and Saul at this moment. We're trying to determine exactly, well, why are you so upset? Why are you so angry? And Saul is just enraged. What has he done? Why are you so mad at him? And he gets to the point that you will notice what Saul says in verse 30. Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. He said, "You son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness. For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die. Saul says, I know you're David. I know you're with David. In fact, notice that he will never call him David. Saul will always say, son of Jesse, derogatory term. You're with that son of Jesse. And so he's angry with him. And I mean, imagine the names that he's calling his own son. You son of a perverse, rebellious woman. And you terrible, wretched son that you are. And I know that you're with David in all of this. Jonathan in verse 32, well, before I bring that up, verse 31, so important that Saul brings out the point. If David stays alive, you're not going to be king, Jonathan. Now that was important because we saw that earlier in our last lesson where we saw Jonathan giving his own princely garments to David and saying, I recognize you're the anointed. And Jonathan fully understands that and accepts that. Saul does not. Saul is still rebelling against the will of God here. And notice Jonathan's answer, verse 32. Jonathan answered Saul, why should he be put to death? What has he done? And Saul hurled his spear at him to strike him. So Jonathan knew that his father was determined to put him to death. Not only is Saul rebelling against the will of God, when Jonathan says, well, what has he done? But we should put him to death. That's the second time he's done that. He saved his life last time. The spear that Saul has been trying to use to pin David to the wall, we're told that Saul and Jonathan were sitting across from each other at the table. And he grabs his spear and throws it at Jonathan. And now Jonathan is finally understanding that this isn't truly the case, that David is right, and that Saul is intending on killing David, even though he's been hiding it from his son, Jonathan. Verse 35, next morning Jonathan does what he says. He has his boy go out to the field. He's going to shoot his arrows. He shoots them long so that David can be informed. In fact, the words that are said there are very important as he's shouting out to the boy. First he shouts out, it's not the arrow beyond you, so that David's out there and can hear, okay, the message is it's not safe. But Jonathan confirms it in verse 38, hurry, be quick, do not stay. Make it sound like he's talking to the boy. Hurry up, be quick, hurry, go get those arrows. We sound like David. Hurry, don't stay. But interestingly enough, rather than that being that, Jonathan wants to see David still yet. And you will notice even after giving the signal, he tells the boy who has gathered up his arrows in verse 40 to go back into the city. And as soon as the boy is gone in verse 41, Jonathan goes out to David. And just, I don't know that we can appreciate how fearful David is. You'll notice in verse 41, as Jonathan approaches David is bowing on the ground. And you're going to see David do that a lot. He's done it already before Jonathan. He does it again here. And the implication of it is, my life in your hands. Because he understands, Jonathan is the son of Saul. Are you going to go up against your father, who is the king, who, if David is killed, he gets to be king next? You can understand this is a tenuous relationship, how this would feel on David's end. Is he going to be in league with his father? Is he going to listen to his father? Is he going to do what the king says? Is he going to go back on his word that he said that he would protect me and be with me? And so as Jonathan comes out there to where David is in verse 41, you see David on the ground weeping, and he's falling down on the ground. And notice in verse 42 that Jonathan confirms the covenant with David again and says, go in peace, because we have sworn, both of us, in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between you and me, and between my offspring and your offspring forever. You have Jonathan saying, you have nothing to worry about with me. We made a covenant, and we are going to keep that covenant. Me and you, your offspring, my offspring, that's the way it's going to be. And so with that, then, David then flees to the wilderness, and Jonathan heads back into the city. This sets up, I think, a really interesting picture that what happens next. It's a controversial So David is on the run. Chapter 21 opens. He comes to a town called Nob. And we read of Ahimelech there is the priest. Ahimelech sees David coming, and Ahimelech comes out to him trembling. He's afraid. And he says to David, "Why are you alone? Why is no one with you?" Now imagine, everywhere David goes, he's the commander of armies, right? He's the right-hand man of Saul when it comes to battles and fights. And it doesn't make an awful lot of sense to see David just wandering into a town all by himself. So you can imagine the reason, like, why are you here? What is going on? Where are your men? Where's your armies? Where's the entourage? What are you doing? Why have you come to this place? He's nervous about him. Verse 2, David kind of tells a story here. We'll see the reason why. In verse 2, "The king has charged me with a matter and said to me, 'Let no one know anything of the matter of which I send you and of which I have charged you, and I've made an appointment with the young men for such and such a place.'" So David begins by saying, "I am on a secret mission. And my men are not here right now. I've told them to meet me at another spot." And so this is all under secrecy here at Ahimelech. And you notice he asks in verse 3 then, "Do you have any food? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever is here. Me and my men need food." And Ahimelech says in verse 4, I don't have any common bread. We don't have anything here on hand. However, there is the holy bread. And if you and your men have remained pure and abstained from women, essentially remained holy, I will let you have the holy bread for you. And so David says in verse 5, "We have truly kept ourselves away from women. We're maintaining our purity and holiness." And so in verse 6, we see that Ahimelech give him the holy bread because there was no other bread except this bread of the presence. And verse 6 gives us a bit of an explanation, which is removed from before the Lord and is replaced by the hot bread on the day it is taken away. So it's important to understand what Ahimelech is doing here, because we don't want to misunderstand. You'll notice that what happens is Ahimelech is not going and taking the bread that is dedicated to God. Once that hot bread had been dedicated to God, was to be replaced with new bread. And so when the new bread would go in, the old bread would be taken. And Leviticus 24 commands that was the priest's bread. That was for the priest to eat. And that's what Ahimelech is offering. He said, "We don't have common bread laying around here. However, we just replaced the bread of the presence. And so we have that holy bread that is for us priests to eat. And we will give it to you if you've been holy." And David says, "We have." And so then he goes about taking this bread. And so Ahimelech is making a determination about David and his life and saying, "Since you're on the secret mission and you guys are in need of food, I will give you that bread." We'll talk more about that in a minute. The reason for the secrecy, though, is told to us in verse 7. So you have to follow it through. Very important why David is telling the story the way he is. In verse 7, "There was a certain man of the servants of Saul who was there that day, detained before the Lord. His name was Doeg the Edomite, the chief of Saul's herdsmen." Now the reason why I wanted to go all the way to chapter 23 is because Doeg's going to come back into play very quickly. But we're going to have to kind of hold him in our minds right now and notice who he is. He is an important figure in Saul's administration. He is a chief herdsman for Saul. And so David understands this guy here is going to report back everything that he's seen and heard. And so this is what David starts doing, is say, "Well, Saul sent me on a mission, and I'm not allowed to say much about it," because Doeg is right there in the midst of this. He's seeing all this unfold, and he's hearing this, and David knows this is going to get back to Saul. And in a couple of chapters, you're going to see that's exactly what happens. This information does go back to Saul. And so notice that's why the story continues in verse 8. David said to Ahimelech, "Then have you a sword here or a spear or anything like that? For I have brought neither sword or my weapons with me, because in the king's business there was required such haste. I just got going so fast, and that's why I didn't bring a sword or a spear or anything like that. So again, this is why the secretive nature of all of this, why it's a secret mission, and I forgot my weaponry, and why we were in such haste to do what Saul wanted us to do. He's protecting not only himself, but attempting to be able to protect Amalek and the priests that are there. And with that, a very amazing, interesting answer. When David asked for the weapons, verse 9, the priest said, "The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you struck down in the valley of Elah, behold, it is wrapped here in a cloth behind the ephod. If you will take that, take it, for there is none but that here." Last time we read about Goliath's sword was that David put it in his own tent. And so my supposition is he'd given it to Ahimelech for safekeeping to hold it. Why would Ahimelech have Goliath's sword? I mean, it doesn't say. But David's the last one who had possession of it, so perhaps he knows about that. So what weapon do you have here? And Ahimelech says, well, the sword that you took off of Goliath when you cut his head, that's the sword that's here. I love David's answer in verse 9. He says, there's none better than that. Give that one to me. That's the best sword around. Let's take that, and that'll work for us. And so with that now, David continues to flee for his life. As Jonathan said that Saul is out to kill him, that is going to be what we are going to see over the next few chapters is Saul at every turn is going to send people and servants and armies to try to kill David, try to hunt him down, try to take his life. And so what David does here in these final few verses of chapter 21 is he tries to hide in Gath. He goes to Philistia. Now, you must recognize the irony is absolutely dripping here because he's taken Goliath's sword, who is from Gath, and decides to go to Philistia and go to a man named Achish, who is the king of Gath. Well, not surprisingly, that doesn't go terribly well because you'll notice the verse 11, the servants of Achish say, "Is not this David the king of the land?" Interesting. Isn't this David the king? And so they said, did they not sing to one another about him? And David says, Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000. So they immediately recognize, we know who this guy is. This guy is the king of Israel, and here he is coming into Gath. And so in verse 12, David is very much afraid. He takes these words to heart. In verse 13, he changes his behavior and pretends to be insane in their hands. He starts having spit running down his mouth and starts marking on the doors and starts looking like he's completely crazy, and so that they will not see him as a threat. They think, well, here's the king of Israel, let's do something to him. So he's got to look like he's out of his mind, and that's what he goes about doing. What David is recognizing is even fleeing is not going to work for him. We're going to see this happen on a number of occasions where David is going to try to leave the land of Israel, and ultimately God's going to put him back in the land of Israel. This is what's going to happen here, is he attempts to hide in Philistia. That's not going to work. They know exactly who he is, and so he leaves there and goes back into the land of Israel. Chapter 22, verse 1, he ends up in the cave of Adullam. And I want you to notice this final picture for us this evening. Then we'll have to do the rest of these chapters, Lord willing, next week. But you'll notice at the end of verse 1 of chapter 22, when his brothers and his family in his father's house heard it, they all go to him at the cave. And then in verse 2, everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul gathered to him, and he became the commander over them, and there were with him about 400 men. Really neat picture. Back to Israel he goes, hides in a cave, and all the outcasts come to him that are in Israel. All right. Lots to talk about there. Lots of important pictures. Let's start taking them on one by one. Let's talk about the controversy of the anointed. What David does here is of boundless controversy. It is fascinating to see how people try to understand exactly what David and Ahimelech are doing. And one of the reasons why this becomes such a controversy and such a problem is because of what Jesus says as he brings up this illustration and uses it to make a point. Notice what has happened with Jesus in Mark 2, verse 23. Here's Jesus, and you have the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. They're challenging Jesus, and they're saying, your disciples are plucking grains on the Sabbath. And this is his answer. Have you never read what David did when he was in need and was hungry? He and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God in the time of Abiathar the high priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and also gave it to those who were with him. And he said that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Now, I've been surprised to see how this response of Jesus has been understood by some. So I'm going to have to take out an argument and lay out what I think is happening here. What I think is important to see is Jesus cannot be saying that he's breaking the law just like David did. Now, I know when you read this and Jesus says that David ate what was unlawful, that Jesus' point is not, yep, you're right, David did something unlawful, and therefore I did something unlawful also. That can't be the point, but often that's been the point that's been taken out of this is, well, David broke the law, and Jesus broke the law, but somehow that's okay, and he's trying to vindicate himself. That's not his point. What he's going to show is David didn't break the law. And so what David did, if that didn't break the law, neither is what Jesus is doing, breaking the law either. It's very important what Jesus highlights as he lays out this description. And he says, even though it was something that was in general terms unlawful to eat, do you notice the description that he gave to them? He said, have you never read what David did when he was in need and hungry? Jesus makes a point about what happens here. And it's the very thing that you see the priest doing as well, is he is making an observation that David and his men are hungry and in need. And Jesus is making the same point about himself. This is the connection that Jesus wants to make to David. Is here's the issue, is we also are in need. We are also hungry, and therefore it is okay for us to do this. Now, think about this. How can you say that David didn't break the law, even though clearly the law said not to eat that? And how could you say then that Jesus is not breaking the law? The answer, though, is very simple. They were hungry. That's the simple answer that Jesus is ultimately giving here. The answer is they were hungry and they were in need. The point that he makes is that the law was not put into place to harm. The law was not put into place so that the hungry could not eat or that the needy could not be taken care of. Now, and then what we're seeing is Jesus even saying the priest judged rightly. Now, we use this idea all the time. I'll use a couple of examples. Can you imagine if you were driving here to the church building tonight and right in front of you happened this horrific accident, and you said, well, God wants me to go to church, so hope they're okay, and you rendered no help or no support whatsoever. No. There's an extenuating circumstance here where life is on the line, and you clearly must do what is right and good by that person. You don't sit there and go, well, God wants me to worship, so, good luck to everybody out there, and I hope you're okay, but God's going to call me to be there. You understand that there are circumstances like this that arise that cause for a different application of what God wants us to do. I'll use another illustration. If you would imagine that somebody were a threatening gunman knocked on the door of your home and said, "Where is your family?" And you said, "Well, I can't tell a lie. They're back there in the bedroom." No, wait a minute. Life has the higher level over the situation that's laying out. You would obviously not say, "Oh, they're right over there behind the door. Go knock yourself out." This is the point that's happening with David as well as it's happening with Jesus. Is it okay just to go in there and just eat holy bread? No, of course not. But this is a special circumstance where David is hungry and in need. And that's what Jesus is putting his finger on and saying, obviously David was right to do that. It was acceptable to do that. The priest is not condemned for that choice. And that is the whole point that he gets at here in verse 27 when he says, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. This is the whole point that he's trying to get across to them there, is a recognition that of course you wouldn't do that. You think about how many times Jesus had to argue that with the Pharisees. For example, when on the Sabbath, if your ox fell in the ditch, he says, who among you doesn't go in the ditch and pull out the ox, even though that is work? But obviously, life comes above that. And that's what he was even arguing with that when he was making the point about healing a man on the Sabbath. How could you say healing on the Sabbath is wrong and life has a greater level than that? And that's what Jesus is doing here with this. So, in short, it would be the preservation of life is greater than maintaining the bread laws. And notably important, the priest understands that. He says, I don't have common bread, but you're hungry and in need, so I will give you what God said was reserved only for the priest to eat. I'll let you have that because of the necessity of the situation before us. I would like to also note that Jesus pushes this one level further in Mark's account as well, because he also then goes on to say, so the Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath. One of the things that we have been seeing as we move through 1 Samuel is the importance of the anointed. That is being highlighted to us again and again and again. Here is the anointed. Here is the one to rescue. We're seeing Jonathan yielding even to David because David is the anointed one. We're going to see later on, David won't kill Saul because Saul is the anointed one. Whoever is the anointed one is of the utmost importance, and the preservation of the anointed is everything. David understands that. Jonathan understands that. And I think that's so important for us to recognize is that what Jesus then argues is the superiority of the anointed. The law was not given to constrain him. Now let me use an illustration of that. For decades upon decades upon decades, presidents have run red lights when they've been in their limousines and their entourages as they go all over towns, right? Why don't the cops pull him over? Hey, you're breaking the law. You're not supposed to do that. Well, because that's laws doesn't apply to him, because he's the president of the United States. This is the second point that Jesus makes. Not only did David not break the law because he was hungry, he didn't break the law because he's the anointed. And the anointed must be preserved. And that Jesus then applies even to himself. He's not breaking the law because, one, we're hungry. Sabbath was made for man. It was for him, not to harm man. And then second, to say, do you understand who I am? Even the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. I'm above that. That law doesn't apply to me at this moment. And so I think that's important to see as well. These are the two pictures that Jesus gives here. And I think it is amazing to see that here out of Psalm 1 Samuel 21, to see that that's the picture that David even lays out, and how Jesus would use that in a beautiful picture of who the anointed is, and the controversy that would surround him. I want you to think about, in Jesus' life, all you see in his life is controversy after controversy after controversy. The Pharisees are after him, the Sadducees are after him, the scribes are after him. And this is something that is already being revealed to us back here about David, is the controversy that will surround him. In fact, there are so many pictures about what the anointed is going to do and what he's going to look like. We're going to read now over these next few chapters that David is going to have his life threatened over and over again. He will be in danger regularly, and he is going to have trouble nearly everywhere he goes going forward. And the reason why that's important is because this was going to be a picture so that when you saw the Christ come and him be resisted and have his life threatened and have the authority stand against him, you wouldn't be surprised that you would recognize that that's actually what had to happen. There's occasions where Jesus will talk about how, don't you know that the Son of Man had to suffer? You ever thought about, where do the scriptures ever say that? Where does it say the anointed one, the Messiah, has to suffer? And usually all we ever end up with is Isaiah 53. We go, well, see, Isaiah 53 shows it. But Jesus gives indication that it's not like there's this one sole passage out there that you better find to know that this was going to happen. That this was a picture that was given here. That the anointed would be on the run, suffer distress, be in danger, have his life threatened, go through difficulties. When you see this in the life of David, you are learning this is what's going to happen in the future when the Lord's anointed comes again. Second, with him being on the run, it is interesting, and we're going to see in this time period, he's not going to have any rest. He goes to one place, another place, another place. Can he stay where Saul is at? No. So he says, let's go to the Philistines. Is that going to work? No, that's not going to work. Let's go in a cave. No, that's not going to work. He's going to go to Moab. That's not going to work. He's going to come back to Israel again. He's going to be in one wilderness and have to go to another wilderness and another wilderness, constantly on the run without any rest. And you see Jesus doing that. Remember, as he talks to his disciples, like in Matthew 8, verse 20, he talked about, even animals have holes that they can rest and sleep in. And birds are able to make nests to rest in, but the Son of Man has no place to rest, no place to lay his head. Rest. Well, notice we're getting that with David already. David on the run is picturing what's going to happen when the anointed arrives. He's going to be chased, and he's not going to have rest. In fact, you're going to see the anointed have to leave the land of Israel in an effort for protection and refuge. You know that picture really well. You know at Jesus' birth, immediately we have Joseph and Mary going to Egypt and having to leave the land to be able to protect Jesus. Same thing is that you're going to see the anointed having to not only be on the run and not have rest and have controversy and endangering his life, but also even leaving the land before he'll come back. These are all pictures all being given to us in the life of David. How about this? When David goes to the Philistines, they think he's insane. Don't forget, Mark 3:21 says, Jesus' own family thought Jesus was insane. We sometimes can miss that little thing there, but even Jesus' family, and all that he's doing, thought he was out of his mind. So again, we're noting another parallel between the activity of David and the activity of Jesus. But the big one that I want you to see tonight is there in chapter 22 and verse 2, where it says, everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul, gathered to him, and he became commander over them. If we had like a whole separate half hour with that, think about Isaiah 61 and the prophecy that's given there, that the Spirit of the Lord is called anointed to bring the good news. And who is he bringing the good news to? The poor, the outcasts, the imprisoned. It's just picture of what the Messiah would ultimately do is he is going to take anyone who is distressed, anyone who is downtrodden, anyone who is oppressed, anyone who's discontent, anyone who is in debt, and he's going to call them to follow him. I think this is perhaps one of the biggest pictures we see here. And I submit to you that this is ultimately our greatest hope. Because I think if we are honest with ourselves, we fall into that category. Are you distressed? Are you an outcast? Are you downtrodden? Is life just being thrown upside down? Going through hardship and difficulty? These are the people Jesus came and called. Jesus doesn't go to the palaces and call people. He doesn't go to the city of Rome and say, okay, all you Romans, come follow me. He doesn't even hardly go to Jerusalem until it's time for his death, except what's required of him to go to Jerusalem. He's out in the sticks. He's out in Galilee. He's on the other side of the Jordan. He's going to the oppressed and the outcasts, those who are the nobodies. This is the very picture the Apostle Paul made as he wrote to the Corinthians. Remember, he told them, and he said that Christ had not called the wise or the powerful or the noble, but those who were weak to come to him. It's always been a picture that Jesus doesn't call the popular, Jesus doesn't call the powerful, he doesn't call those who are rich, but he calls those who are weak. Remember what James says in James 2 and verse 5, that God declared that the poor of the world would be the ones who are rich toward God. I am just blown away, and we're going to pick up right here on that verse next week, so I won't talk so much more about that verse. But I'm just blown away by that idea, that here is David hiding in a cave. He has nothing to offer except he's the anointed. And the people who will come to him are not the people of power and not the rich, but the outcasts and the downtrodden and the distressed. That's who Jesus is calling. Those are the people who will respond to the invitation. And friends, that's our greatest hope, is that that's us. We are the ones who are broken. We are the ones who are hurting. And Jesus receives us in that very condition. If you're broken, if you are distressed, that you would give that distress, that you give that broken heart, and that you give that life to Jesus. Jesus went through this kind of suffering, and he went through this kind of distress, so that we would come to him, and he would understand that distress. Isn't it great that Jesus is born in a no-name place, to a no-name family, with no wealth, no recognition, no pomp and circumstance, no look at me, no fireworks, no here he is. He's just the average person who suffers and dies so that he can understand what you're going through. Those are the people he wants. Let's go to God in prayer. Heavenly Father, it is just hard to believe. It's hard to believe that the all-powerful, glorious Son would not come to this world and receive the honor and glory that he ought to deserve. And we are just astounded that for all of the honor, parades, and attention that he should have received while he was here, he lived in a nowhere place so that he could call all who were distressed and who are not the strong, who are not the wealthy, but just simple people